So the Middle East was a place where there were competing cultures and beautiful women from different places, different types of food and alcohol and drugs and philosophies. And so the people whose philosophy, whose God, whose essence, their tactics, what they spend their time looking into, what they do for a living, etc., it goes back to the drugs, psychology, technology, and spiritual dishonesty. Lucifer, the deceiver, Satan, the great deceiver, um, Loki, Pan, and we can go on and on about the different stories, even in the Bible, where even people who are seen as protagonists use trickery to accomplish something. But of course, what they're doing couldn't possibly be played off as, an innocent trick or a white lie. It's very malicious indeed, harmful. A lot of people are suffering and dying. People who are meant to lead us, such as myself, are not given their rightful places. So instead, people adopt a philosophy of greed and immorality and sexual depravity and what have you. So let me tell you a few things that I'm dogmatic about. I am dogmatic and I emphasize the male energy of God more than I naturally would have felt the need to, because we live in a culture that challenges that idea from many angles: feminists, atheists, gay revisionists, gay academics, and so on. We see different levels of people with different levels of education from different walks of life with different perspectives, who are challenging this idea. And I see the commonalities, that they all have a complex related to their role in society. An inferior or your complex, a complex related to how they compare to the traditional view of the ideal man or a leader or a king or a pharaoh. Okay, so when we kind of give God human characteristics, I'll put the word for it in the comments. It slipped my mind. This is what is being done. Okay, these people say we're gay, we're this, we're that. We're going to look at history and try to make an argument with our experts at Yale and Harvard and Stanford, that makes it seem like God was actually worshipped as some kind of dual gendered being or non-gendered being. Anything to avoid the ancient paradigm of the African martial artist priesthood and all of the cultures next to it that adopted and incorporated these ideas, who were infatuated and impressed and terrorized, similarly to the way that whites to this day feel kind of interested and terrorized by black culture. Who watches all these ghetto movies? It's mostly white people, and even though they might not live in the ghetto and they might not go out their way to participate in the culture, it's the same kind of natural inclination to copy the black man. There's a degree of that. Now, I'm not saying that that's all that was going on and that it didn't go the other way sometimes, but this is what you see as part of what is going on. And so another thing that I'm dogmatic about is that man cannot be like God. If I saw it their way, I would be the king of the gods, unless they manage to use psychology, drugs, technology, and spiritual dishonesty, which is the main way they operate. To convince me that I'm not as good as I think I am, and not as good as someone in their club or someone who's their race, etc., couldn't prove it, right? So they make this kind of pseudoscientific argument, this pseudoscientific hypothesis that they're trying to shove down your throat because it happens to make them look good, and and the fertility and the reproductive activities, the sexual activities in life work a certain way and play out in their favor. They get the nice women, they have the nice jobs, and no one is saying you're a fucking traitor. Where's your morality? Where's your humanity, man? Instead, it's like, oh, you're doing what you should be doing, and it's normal. And these bitches are at the bar looking all sexy, hoping you know that you date them or whatever. So, moving on, you look at the word dogma itself. Okay, it comes from the idea of something seeming good, if you look it up, right? So it's the people who have dogma, who believe in certain concepts, versus people who have a more scientific perspective. That goes back to faith versus science. It's not religion versus science. It is faith in the ancestors' perception of nature and what is natural, and faith in your logic. For example, the Zulu warrior being superior to some kind of little, pale magic card bitch who wants you to, who gets some book from the library and wants you to see it their way when it comes to spirituality, and them as some kind of powerful spiritual being when they're using drugs, psychology, technology, and spiritual dishonesty, instead of proving it like the martial artist is. He says, I move energy, and then he proves it. They challenge him with technology. They trace the energy moving through his body. So even from their perspective, the martial artist is moving energy, but they want to twist their spiritual aspects of it and your perceptions of the spiritual aspects of it, so that it makes them look good and them seem like the experts instead of the people who actually are, who prove it. Pseudoscientific hypothesis from a bunch of complex having, insecure bitches versus those who the ancestors would have celebrated and elevated and rewarded, and those who, when put in context, would be the head of the spiritual order, and the social order, the warriors. Whether we're talking about Shaka Zulu, right? The people who saw themselves as the people of heaven, who spoke the language of heaven, who had a warrior culture, a martial art culture, where they had Zulu spear and shield drills, Zulu spear and shield forms, martial art culture. They said, we are going to prove this. And in the ancient world, there were all these competing cultures, and the very idea of spirituality itself that all you people are drawing on, the essence of it is, well, prove it with your martial artists. Prove it. And at the end of the day, the map spoke for itself. The civilization sprung out of the area, because you got to look at religions as groupings of areas. For example, Native American religions have more in common with each other, generally speaking, than with, Middle Eastern religions. You see what I'm saying? So once you group it together, now we're in Africa, and the cultures that affect the Egyptian civilization, are African. Okay, and when they did the studies, they found that yes, these gods come from the region, and they're region specific. And then there's shared geographic features, in geology. Okay, you have shared terrain. They share the Nile, with other places, for example. The White Nile, the Blue Nile, Uganda, Ethiopia. So when you look at this thing, you put it into context, okay, to remove the idea of the African martial artist scale is to become of this world. You're letting, your complex, which came as a result of you being in this world, your spirit being in this world, cloud your judgment, and you now lost the natural scale. Naturally, when everyone was competing and when God was watching and choosing who to win, you see this in the Bible, you see this in other religions as well. Our God has triumphed us because we did what we're supposed to do, because we followed the accompanying moral code, and that helped people define spirituality and understand the spiritual world. It's how the Igbos became Christian. It's how Christianity became the dominant religion. Natural, partially how it spread. They didn't spread it by putting a gun to their head in every case. Partially how it spread was people saying, hey, naturally God chose them. So now the answer to this, when you look at the trajectory of religion and spirituality, it is to screen out these inferior forms of life who want to convince you that they're the top of the spiritual pyramid, that they should dictate how you live your life, or you should emulate them, or you should be advised by them, or mentored by them, or fall under the auspices and the tutelage of scum like that. Think about it. So these are moral relativists and the resulting science experiments. When you see it my way, do you experiment on people with drugs and drug people and rape them and fucking, use technology on them and, you little bitch behind the scenes that's all talk? No. When you see things like them, you emphasize walking in the light and proving it, like Elijah proved it, like Jesus proved it with miracles, and so on and so forth. You emphasize, like, I'm proving it. I'm proving it, And then when people say, prove it this way, you say, well, you show that whether that way or this way is better, goes back to the natural scale, not your fucking Babylonian, Greco-Roman, Talmudic derived social norms, you fucking pussies, you unnatural dogs. It's infuriating that you would even imply that we should abandon the natural scale for some kind of fucking corporate sponsored. Just shut the fuck up. Anyway, so you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, because I'm running out of time here. Let's just shoot through this. They had sexual initiations that would, as said by the Yale professor, I'll put in the comments, that would civilize and tame and civilize Gilgamesh through this sexual initiation that was like 6 days and 7 nights or something. Knowledge goes back to know. To know in the biblical sense is sex. So there's on so many levels, they're trying to control reproduction, eugenics, population control, right? Sexual initiations, sex cults, fertility cults. On so many levels, they want you to make the sniveling little bitch who sees it like a little bitch the one you have sex with. Whether he's a little rich bitch, whether he's a fraternity, Greek society bitch, going back to the Greco-Roman pederasty and homosexuality, and why is it spreading, right? Because we have a bunch of colleges with Greek homosexual societies, with Greek fraternities that are, for one gender, right? So you have a bunch of lesbians, talking to a bunch of females in Greek societies, and you have a bunch of gays, talking to a bunch of guys who are in college, who are more suggestible, who are learning things, who are in the mind state of the learner, the apprentice, right? And that goes back to psychology, drugs, technology, and spiritual dishonesty. You roofie, using alcohol, famous for raping bitches and lying sniveling, lying about history and the history department type of bitches, propaganda bitches, MK Ultra bitches in your science departments. And you think humanity's better off listening to you? You're anti-Christian dogs. You're just, wow, there's just no logic there. None. You behind the scenes bitches. All right. So the masculine God wants me to set it straight, bust out these sex and secret groups who are uncivilized. Right? It is more civilized to do something that's evil behind the scenes than it is to do it on the kitchen fucking table in front of your family or somewhere on national TV, but it is still uncivilized. So yes, you are less civilized than the Christian, you detestable, unnatural pagan dogs. All right, so proven spiritual power versus claimed. Moving energy versus grappling and focusing on scientific principles of torque and flesh and not focusing on the energy, right? If your philosophy is better than mine and you're focusing on the science of it, why can't you beat me, you fucking cowards? Because your philosophy is inferior. And as a result, you don't live in reality as much as I do. So when it matters most, the ancient scale, the natural scale, the martial arts competition, even with all your privilege and mentors and trainers, you come up short. Because my God is superior, and I am a superior product as a result. So brute, a spiritual brute versus a spiritually minded man, right? Blood sport versus sparring. Defining spirituality and violent contexts of spirituality, codes of engagement, okay? The soul and how it relates to the mind and body. The soul and the being as a source of energy and energy, emanating from it. So now I've mastered my energy more than you have, and I can conquer you in this realm specifically for that reason. So whether we're in this realm or the next, according to the natural scale, the pervasive scale, the Afro-Asiatic scales, what the commonalities, where we see the similarities. Are there dissimilarities or similarities? There's similarities when it comes to these core beliefs, these things that Christians are dogmatic about. They're similar concepts. That's where they were derived from, right? That's why the popular arguments are these people got these ideas from the cultures around them in the scientific community because, there's similarities. So for you to discard the similarities, the core of all these religions, makes you a fucking idiot. It's like I've proven it naturally in the light. The priests of Baal have been defeated by Elijah. The priests of fucking the liberal, anti-Christian pagan priests, the atheists, the Luciferian dogs have been defeated by the Son of God, by the great Sagidi of this generation. The name that rings the loudest in Zulu culture isn't some fucking maggot, isn't some rat, isn't some fucking magic car bitch. It was the martial artist, the most significant martial artist in their culture. And I am the most significant martial artist in American culture culture, the closest to God, with the most powerful spiritual energy. And that is a result of my personal philosophy and personal perspective. And yes, I am a Christian with my personal take. I am the product of God's glory. They are the product of insecurity and inferiority. Thank you.